In a flash that could topple kingdoms, what if one woman's unyielding quiet turned a senator's cocky remarks into his downfall? Just 47 seconds into a riveting national hearing, J.D. Vance flashed a smile like a hunter, eyeing easy game, then fired off 9 words that slashed through the room like broken glass. Fake degree from night school. She has no place here. The whole place went stone silent. But Jasmine Crockett did not even flinch. She reached for her sleek leather folder, and what happened next did not just damage a reputation, it tore open a scar in the nation's core. What bombshell was so powerful? It made a Harvard-supported senator fade like a ghost under the bright lights. He tossed it out casually, like chatting about the forecast. Some of us hustled to build real legal smarts. Others grabbed diplomas like cheap coupons. And right then the room held its breath. Nobody let out a sound. Nobody moved a muscle. But the silence thickened, almost solid, sharp enough to cut through uncertainty. Those words did not just hang there, they twisted and dug deep into everyone who had ever fought for recognition without the shine of fancy elite walls carved in stone. J.D. Vance kept his eyes steady. He smoothed his tie like it was no big deal, as if his jab was not a raw strip down in front of the whole country. He skipped her name, but he did not need to spell it out. Everyone knew the arrow pointed straight across the table. Jasmine stayed completely still. The second camera zoomed in tight. No hint of feeling, no sigh of annoyance. Just her hand locked on the zipper of her leather bag, frozen mid-thought like a brewing storm. The kind of quiet that means strategy, not fear or mix-up. J.D. leaned back, pleased, as punch-tapping his pen once on the desk, then looking at the committee chair like a kid expecting bonus points. You could almost sense the smug vibe humming under his skin, but the rest of the room was not buying it anymore. A young aide stopped typing cold. A producer up in the press area whispered, "Did he really throw that out without naming names?" Across social media, the line spread like wildfire on dry grass. Reposted, shared again with notes, like, "Did JD just call her degree bogus? And coupons come on?" But Jasmine said zip. She did not stand up, did not jump in, did not blink. Her quiet became the biggest noise in the place, heavier than JD's tone, sharper than his dig. It was the type of hush that makes folks uneasy, the kind that says someone is plotting behind those eyes. She slowly curled her fingers into a fist around the zipper. Still closed, still waiting. JD glanced over, maybe expecting a comeback or hoping for one. But Jasmine stared straight ahead, like she was seeing something nobody else could because she had been through this before. Different spot, different guy, same old routine. And she had learned a key lesson in those times. When they try to tear down your worth in front of everyone, the worst move is to react on impulse. So she held steady. She waited like a hidden spark pretending to be harmless wire. And all over the country, millions of viewers leaned in closer to their screens, not to catch her words, but to see when she would finally drop them. Because quiet like that does not stay silent long, especially when it packs serious. Ammo. What if the deadliest tool in a clash of minds is not a yell, but a smart pause? J.D. Vance kept his voice level. No need to crank it up. His words came out smooth and solid, like playing winning cards in a sure bet. "Some of us grind to earn true legal brains," he said, pausing just long enough for the room to take it in. "Others collect diplomas like bargain stamps." The phrase hit like a knife on smooth stone, sharp, cold on purpose. Nobody laughed, not even his own side. A few shot side glances. Others sank lower in their seats, avoiding any splash damage. The chair froze, unsure whether to jump in or pretend nothing happened. The insult was not subtle. It was pinpoint accurate. He left out Jasmine's name, but the direction was dead on, right across the table like an arrow let loose without a second thought. Jasmine Crockett sat frozen. The profile camera caught her like a classic painting. Her face stayed solid. No eye roll, no tight jaw. Just her hand resting on the worn leather bag in her lap, fingers touching the zipper like checking it was still there. Still zipped, still holding back. It was not the silence of someone clueless on how to hit back. It was the silence of someone who had already planned the endgame. And it would not wrap up here. Nationwide, thousands of folks froze mid-sip, mid-scroll, mid-comment. On X, fake degree and coupon jabs started trending fast. On Facebook, clips of JD's words got cut, captioned, and picked apart. Did he really say that to her on live television? JD leaned back slow, tapping his pen twice, like sealing a winning deal. He thought it was done, but it was not. Jasmine held firm, and that made it worse. She sat like a charge not yet set off. Not yet, but everyone knew it was there. Out in plain sight, coiled up dangerous. This was not the first time someone tried to define her by her school name. She had heard worse in flickering courtrooms with leaky ceilings. She had been called the diversity, picked the hot-tempered one, the inner-city lawyer, but never on national television, in a room full of people too scared to stop it. And that made this different because it was not just about her. It was about every black woman who earned a spot without a silver spoon. Every first-gen student who studied under streetlights. Every kid from evening classes who got it done anyway. The pen stopped tapping. The cameras kept rolling. JD Vance smiled without looking up, like he had just dropped the line that would kill on cable news. But across the room, Jasmine's thumb pressed against the zipper pull. Slow, deliberate, then stopped. She did not open the bag. Not yet. Because real lawyers, the ones who live the role, not just wear the title, do not argue with slights. They wait for the right moment to drop hard evidence. What if quiet is not giving up but the start of a takedown? Jasmine did not speak. Not when JD's words cut the room, not when the air got heavy with tension. She did not flinch, did not blink, did not lean for the mic like the world expected, because she did not need to win the second she needed to own the space. And she knew how. The silence was not hesitation. It was history. It was every courtroom she had walked into where her heels clicked louder than the guys wanted, where her voice calm and southern edge made judges lean forward and opponents back off, where her skin, her gender, her neighborhood had already spoken before she opened her mouth. Years back, before the lights, before Congress, before the red recording dots ever flashed, she stood in a courtroom with no air conditioning and peeling ceiling tiles. It smelled like sweat, fear, and red tape. Her client, a teen with more scars than years, faced 20 years for something he did not do. Jasmine was low-paid, overworked, called to court with less than 2 days to prep. But she showed up. She always did. During a break, the other side leaned across the table, sneered, like ordering off a bad menu, and muttered, "They send ghetto lawyers now." He thought she would lose it, thought she would raise her voice, thought she would crumble. She smiled, and then she tore his case apart. She cross-examined his key witness into silence, found a video gap he missed, cited case law he skipped. The jury came back not guilty in under an hour. That smug lawyer would not meet her eyes as he left clutching a briefcase full of failure and a dented rep. That win did not make headlines, but it made her, because in that moment, Jasmine Crockett learned something no Ivy League class could teach. The loudest voice does not win, the calmest one does. So now, sitting feet from JD Vance, she felt no anger. She felt recognition. He was just another shiny version of a system that had tried and failed to block her 100 times. A man who mixed up his degree with his worth. A man who took condescension for confidence. And most of all, a man who could not spot real danger because it was not loud. It was quiet, it sat still, and it waited. Her fingers traced the zipper curve again. The bag felt heavier now. Not because it changed, but because the moment had. Inside were names, dates, receipts, rulings, all packed tighter than the room's tension. JD did not know it, but he had already started the fire. He just did not know who held the match. She looked at him once, just once, and it was not the look of someone hurt. It was the look of someone who had survived worse and was deciding how big she wanted the finish to be. So what would you say if the whole country hung on your answer, and the silence in your throat was the only thing keeping the empire from crumbling? For 12 seconds, the room said nothing. JD Vance stayed quiet. The media gallery held its breath. Jasmine Crockett reached for her bag like she knew the moment was hers, and she was just being polite. She opened the zipper slow, like pulling a pin from a grenade. One hand slipped inside. No quick moves, no show, just control. Quiet, dangerous control. What came out was not a stack of papers or a binder full of legal talk. It was one sheet of folded cream paper, slightly yellowed at the edges like something precious handled too many times. She placed it on the table like a final chess piece, quiet but decisive. Her voice stayed even, still calm, still level, but now every syllable hit like a gavel. "Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would like to enter a letter into the record." It is from the Honorable Judge William Denham, Fifth Circuit, retired. JD's pen stopped tapping, his hands folded. He looked up. Judge Denham presided over a civil rights case I argued in 2019. A wrongful lockup, a man who sat in prison for 8 years without fair process. She unfolded the letter, held it up, then read her eyes, not leaving the paper until the line was done. Miss Crockett's legal thinking, her grasp of past cases, and her courtroom sharpness were better than most Ivy League grads I have seen in 2 decades on the bench. The line did not explode. It sank heavy, unavoidable final. JD blinked once, just once. But it was the first time his face looked unsure, as if his armor, all that polish, all that background, had taken a hit too exact to ignore. Jasmine kept going, each word more precise than the last. Her work did not just bring justice to one man. It reminded the courtroom what the law should sound like when used without ego. She looked up, eyes steady. That is the judge's phrase, not mine. There was no need to raise her voice. She did not have to fight for the floor. JD had already given it up. He just had not realized it yet. For the record, she added, Judge Denham was a Reagan pick. A few murmurs broke from the back of the room. Not dramatic, just enough to say something had shifted, something that could not be undone. She laid the letter flat on the table, lined up the corners with quiet precision, looked at JD finally. Her stare was not loud, but it burned. Not with anger, with memory. Because she was not proving anything to him, she was reminding him it had already been proven in courtrooms. He had never stepped into on battles. He had never needed to fight. And across America, millions were not just watching her read a letter. They were watching a man shrink in real time. Not because he lost the argument, but because she never needed one. And the only thing louder than the silence that followed was the sound of truth taking its seat. The air had not moved in nearly a minute, like the chamber itself was holding back, unsure if it had just seen a win or the start of something much colder. JD Vance tapped his pen twice, not to write, but to shake off the stillness, gnawing at his confidence. Then came the voice, sharp-clipped, full of disdain. And make nice stories, he said, looking straight ahead. Not at her, but not at her. They do not make real lawyers. Nobody gasped this time. Nobody needed to. The insult was not shocking anymore. It was expected. But this one carried a new kind of chill. It was not just brushing off. It was trying to erase her. JD leaned back like he had just scored in a courtroom. Nobody else was fit to enter. But Jasmine did not blink, did not flinch. She did not even look offended. She looked clinical, like watching a sample under glass, one that had just shown how fragile it really was. She tapped her finger once on the table. Just once. Let us test that, she said quietly, like suggesting a simple experiment, not a face-off. JD did not respond. Not yet, because suddenly he was not sure of the ground. Jasmine reached for the file beside her, the same file she had carried in quietly at the hearing start. She did not open it yet, just laid her hand on top like it was a vault needing a touch to unlock. The crowd in the chamber leaned forward. Something was coming. They did not know what, but they knew better than to look away. JD chuckled. Short and dry, Miss Crockett. If this is about another glowing letter from someone who once heard you talk. Jasmine raised her palm to stop him, gentle but firm, without raising her voice. No, Senator, this time you will do the talking. That got his attention. From across the table, Jasmine slid a fresh document forward, a proposed change to the Congressional Ethics Code written in careful legal terms. At the top, a promise to legal accuracy and clear wording. Below it, a line for JD's signature. He scanned it, quick scoffing. What is this supposed to prove? She tilted her head slightly. That you either read what you sign or you do not. JD's jaw tightened. He picked up a pen, almost on instinct. Cameras clicked. The whole nation leaned in. And Jasmine, cool, hard to read, finally let a hint of a smile show. Not smug, not mean, just precise. Because this was not just a comeback, it was a breakdown. And the knife was in her hand. The room was holding its breath. Cameras buzzed like bugs in the heat, catching every twitch, every glance. JD Vance had just turned Jasmine Crockett's education into a joke. And now the silence was his to fill, but hers to break. Jasmine reached down, pulled out a crisp folder, and placed a 2-page document gently in front of her, like sliding a blade across velvet. Without raising her voice, she turned to him and said, This is a proposed pledge for constitutional reform support. Basic straightforward language, just a formality if you believe in legal clarity. She tapped the signature line with her pen, the way a conductor taps the stand before the music starts. JD gave it one fast look, cocky and careless. Gladly, he said, lifting his pen, happy to back real reform. His signature dragged across the paper like a skid mark on pavement. Jasmine did not stop him. She waited, counted the strokes in her head like a beat, then gently turned the paper back toward herself. Her fingers did not shake. Her eyes did not rise. Only her voice sharpened. Page 2, line 11, she said calmly. Read it out loud for us. JD blinked, confused. He leaned forward, eyes scanning the fine print he had not bothered with 30 seconds earlier. The sentence was deceptively simple. Legal precedent may be treated as non-binding in future constitutional changes. For a second, he did not get it. Then the meaning landed like a falling hammer. That is not what I meant to sign, he stammered. You did sign it, Jasmine replied, cutting him off without raising her tone. And what you signed on national television in front of the American people was a direct clash with established U.S. constitutional rules. The air got cold. The tension had a sound like fabric tearing slow. Staffers swapped looks. Phones started vibrating on silent. The moment had gone viral before it even ended. JD opened his mouth but closed it again. There was nothing helpful to say. He had walked into a trap that was not hidden. It was printed in black ink and 12-point font. He just did not care enough to read it. Jasmine did not smirk, did not blink. She just pointed at the bottom line, then looked up, not at him but at the public. This is what happens when ego signs before eyes check. Nobody clapped, nobody moved. But every face in the chamber had shifted a bit like the ground plates of respect. J.D. Vance, who minutes ago mocked her as a real lawyer, had just publicly backed a clause so legally shaky it could topple half the courts on live television. And Jasmine, she had not raised her voice, thrown a jab, or said a single insult. She simply asked him to sign. Then she let the law do what it does best. If you take the time to read it, who is the real lawyer now? The room had not bounced back from the signature slip when Jasmine's phone buzzed once in her lap, sharp and low-key like a needle under soft fabric. She did not jump. The name on the screen was familiar. Ralestrada veteran Capitol reporter and sharp political hound. The message was short, brutal, and fresh. Just hit. Play it. You will know when. Jasmine opened the file with one tap. The thumbnail froze on J.D. Vance with a drink in hand, blazer open, standing before a small group of rich donors. The setting was close-knit. No podium, no press, just fancy glasses and loose egos. Someone had filmed it from a low angle with a phone, shaky but clear enough to hear every word. This was not politics. This was confession in soft light. She paused mid-frame just as JD leaned into his joke. Then she looked up, figuring the timing, the weight, the path. This was not just dirt. This was shrapnel ready to fly. She tapped her mic. Madam Chair, I would like to add a piece of extra context to the record. A video unedited, timestamp from October 2021. The room murmured. JD's head tilted a little, eyes narrowing, not panic yet, but curious in the worst way. Objection, he barked, not verified, out of context. The context Jasmine cut in is your own words, Senator, caught at a private fundraiser. No spin, no notes. The chairwoman nodded. Go ahead. The screen lit up behind them. The video rolled. J.D. Vance's voice, thick with arrogance, echoed through the chamber. She is loud, not smart. She is from some Houston night school. It does not count. Laughter followed, soft, privileged in on it. In the frame, J.D. swirled his drink like toasting his own bias. Gasps whispered through the hearing room. One staffer dropped a pen. Another pressed her palm over her mouth. The clip ended with J.D. saying, America needs lawyers, not noise, and she is all noise. Silence stretched like plastic over a flame. The camera cut back to J.D.'s live face, pale jaw locked, blinking in disbelief that his past self had just stabbed his present one on live television. Jasmine did not look at him. She addressed the chair, her voice steady but electric. I will not defend that clip with an argument. I will let the American people decide if law degrees are defined by zip codes or fat wallets. Her eyes finally met his, but let the record show I did not say a word. You did. JD shifted in his seat, adjusting his tie that suddenly felt too tight. His fingers drummed the table without rhythm exposed. The power he had swung minutes ago had dissolved quietly, harshly in public. Jasmine leaned back, her face hard to read. But inside the chamber and across the country, millions had just seen the first crack in J.D. Vance's armor. And it did not come from an opponent's jab. It came from his own mouth. What if your hidden arrogance just cost you your public spot? J.D.'s voice had just betrayed him on countless screens, but he still clung to control, like a man holding a lifeboat already half underwater. This is slanderous, he snapped, rising halfway from his seat. That video is clearly edited. It is out of context, not allowed. His words hit the air like sparks without fire, dramatic, but quick to die. Jasmine did not flinch. Her fingers slid across the digital panel again. Objection noted, she said calmly. But this hearing is public, and so is your fundraiser. She turned to the chair. With your permission, I would like to play the full clip, unedited, time-stamped, and already checked by an independent media source. The chair nodded without a pause. Proceed. J.D. sank back down like a falling statue. The camera panned to his face, just as the screen behind him came to life. The room dimmed. The clip started not from the insult, but 20 seconds earlier. J.D. was seen laughing, holding a glass of scotch surrounded by dressed-up donors, leaning forward like followers before a talk. His tone was smooth, confident, the kind that had probably raised millions. Listen, he said, smirking. Some of these new Congress members are loud, really loud. But loud does not mean learned. He paused for effect, and then came the killer line. She is from some Houston night school. It does not count. The room in the video laughed. Real laughter. Men in suits, women in pearls. Someone clinked a glass like rewarding meanness. In the chamber, no one moved. The silence was not polite. It was cutting. Aides froze with pens in midair. Reporters stopped typing. Even the American flag on the screen behind J.D. seemed to droop under the weight of his own words. And J.D., he did not blink. He stared straight ahead like a man watching his legacy rewrite itself right then. The clip kept going. J.D. tossing his final line with the confidence of a man who never thought he would get caught. America needs lawyers, not noise, and she is all noise. The clip cut out. The screen went black. No music, no commentary, just stillness, so heavy it rang. Then Jasmine stood. No drama, no raised voice, just presence. Senator Vance, she said softly. When you said night school, you meant the University of Houston Law Center, ranked top 50 nationally, where I graduated with high honors. Her gaze swept the room, then returned to the camera. For some, education is a given from birth. For others, it is a fight. I did not inherit mine. I earned it. While working nights, while caring for a sick parent, while surviving what your donors joke about over drinks. J.D. opened his mouth, but no sound came out. It was the first time in the hearing he looked smaller than the chair he sat in. Jasmine did not need applause. The silence was louder than thunder. And somewhere behind the studio lights in homes across America, millions of viewers sat forward in their seats, wondering just how deep this story went. Because what happens when the mask slips on live television and it is not your opponent's but your own? The last frame of the clip faded to black, but the weight of it hung like smoke that refused to clear. No one spoke. Not the chair, not J.D., not even the stenographer who for a moment forgot to type. The oxygen in the room felt thinner, like truth had sucked out all the spin. Jasmine did not look at J.D. She looked straight into the camera, into America. Her voice was low, precise, like a scalpel, not a sword. Some people pay $300,000 to sound smart, she said, eyes steady, not blinking. Some of us were too busy studying. The words did not echo. They landed. J.D. stiffened, but she still did not turn to him. She was talking to the country now, past the lawmakers, past the network, straight through the lens and into living rooms. Some of us did not have legacy. We had late fees on textbooks and 2 jobs to cover tuition. Her tone did not ask for pity. It stated a fact. The camera cut to J.D. He did not speak. He did not move. Just blinked. Jasmine took one breath, then another, like setting down a memory that used to burn, but now just smoldered. I did not have prep school tutors. I had court-appointed clients. I did not pay to be heard. I had to win to be remembered. Her words were not dramatic. They were deliberate. Like each syllable had been carved from years of being underestimated. The room was still frozen, but the moment was not. It was unraveling JD's posture, undoing his authority. With every passing second, he did not respond. His silence did not protect him. Now it exposed him. The absence of denial felt louder than any defense he could have built. A few feet away, a reporter finally tapped a single key on her laptop. Then another, like the floodgates had cracked. Jasmine inhaled once more, then let her shoulders settle. I am not here because I was handed anything, she said. I am here because I earned everything he thought I bought. She nodded toward JD, but her eyes never left the camera. Behind the scenes, producers at MSNBC were signaling for more airtime. Fox was scrambling to spin it. CNN's ratings were spiking, and yet Jasmine did not spike the ball. She simply stood there in her truth, and it was that stillness, that refusal to put on a show, that made every heartbeat in the room pound louder. Sometimes a courtroom needs no gavel, just a woman who never needed to raise her voice. What if your private arrogance cost you your public seat? Jasmine took a slow breath, then reached into her file, this time not for evidence but for memory. She unfolded a single printed photo, grainy, slightly bent. A younger Jasmine stood in front of the University of Houston Law Center, wearing borrowed heels and a secondhand blazer 2 sizes too big. The wind caught her robe, but not her pride. I was not raised near ivy, she said. I was raised beside IV bags. The room leaned forward. My mother was sick most of my first year. Liver failure, no insurance. Some nights I read tort law in emergency rooms with her wrist still in my hand. Her voice did not crack, but something deeper in the air did. I stocked shelves at Fiesta Mart from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., then studied under flickering lights at the campus diner. I did not have study groups. I had receipts and rent notices. Her tone was not bitter. It was exact. A blueprint of survival. She clicked the remote. On the overhead screen, a graduation ceremony came to life. The University of Houston's seal glowed behind a small wooden podium. A man's voice rose. We are proud to honor Jasmine Crockett, who not only led her class, but did so while caring for her mother, working nights and never missing a deadline. The chamber did not clap. They listened. The dean's voice continued. In 20 years, I have seen raw brilliance, but rarely this kind of fire, this kind of grit, this kind of grace under pressure. The video faded. Jasmine stood still. I did not walk across that stage with honors. I walked across it with scars, she said, and every one of them made me better at my job. Not louder, not prettier, just better. Someone at the back cleared their throat. Another adjusted a mic that did not need it. JD looked down, fingers tapping the table in a slow, annoyed rhythm, but Jasmine was no longer speaking to him. She was speaking for everyone who had ever been told their school was not real. They said my school was not elite, that it was just a place for leftovers, Jasmine continued. But leftovers are what feed people when nothing else is left. And I fed myself night after night with pages that did not care how I looked or where I came from. JD tried to roll his eyes, but it was too late. The energy had shifted. Jasmine was not defending a resume. She was opening up a life. And in a nation where millions never touched ivy walls, her story did not need prestige. It needed no translation. What she built in Houston was not a credential. It was a conviction, and every person watching could feel it rise. Because sometimes the strongest foundation for justice does not come from stone pillars. It comes from concrete sidewalks, walked with tired feet and an unbreakable will. Jasmine did not pause. She let the silence from her graduation story settle like dust on a courtroom bench, then leaned into the mic again, slower this time, heavier. Let me tell you about the case no one wanted, she said, because that is where I earned my degree for real. The screen behind her flickered to a plain mugshot. A black woman, early 40s, gaunt, bruised eyes, empty. Her name was Lydia. She had been accused of stabbing her boyfriend to death during a blackout. No fingerprints, no eyewitness, no weapon, just a confession signed after 19 hours without food or a lawyer. Jasmine's voice lowered each word, clicking like a lock turning. No firm took her case. No donors wanted to help. She had no name, no money, and the public had already decided. Black woman, domestic fight, must be guilty. She turned to the committee, but her words were not just for them anymore. They gave me 40 hours. That is what the state pays for a public defender in a capital case. 40 hours to save a life. That is it. Her hand hovered over her stack of folders. I gave her 400. Gasps did not come, but people stopped blinking. JD's smirk faltered just enough for the camera to catch it. I visited her every Sunday. I met with medical experts, found a forensics professor from Rice who proved the wounds did not match her hand strength. And then I found the neighbor, the one no one talked to, who said she saw a different man running out the back door that night. She paused, eyes scanning the chamber like a surgeon about to cut into the truth. The jury deliberated for 12 minutes. Lydia walked free. First time she had seen daylight in 3 years. Someone in the room exhaled loud, like they had forgotten how. Jasmine was not done. She hugged me outside the courthouse, said, "You are the first person who saw me as human." I went home that night, threw away every job offer that started with "You would fit in better here." She leaned closer, not louder, just deeper. That was the day I understood law is not a trophy. It is a weapon. And if you are not careful, it gets used against the very people it was supposed to protect. JD crossed his arms, trying to look bored, but his jaw clenched like it had heard too much truth for comfort. I did not win that case with a pedigree, Jasmine finished. I won it because I did not stop. And if that makes me less real in your eyes, Senator, then maybe it is time we redefine what real even means. The screen behind her faded to black. But in the minds of everyone watching across the room, across the country, Lydia's face stayed because no resume ever freed a woman from death row. But someone like Jasmine Crockett did. Jasmine did not reach for her file this time. She reached into her coat pocket, slow, deliberate, and pulled out a folded, sun-faded letter. The kind of paper that has been opened and closed too many times, creased like old hands holding on. She unfolded it gently, as if it were something sacred. "This came in the mail 3 months ago," she said, her voice softer than before, but cutting sharper than ever. "From a woman named Rosa, 70 years old, no title, no social media, but her words. They do not need a podium." She glanced at the committee, but did not wait for permission. Jasmine read aloud each word, settling into the room like a heartbeat slowing to truth. "Dear Miss Crockett, I do not have fancy words. I do not know the law, but I remember the day you came to my apartment, sat on my peeling couch, and told me my eviction was illegal." JD shifted in his seat. Another letter, another story, but this one felt different, like it was not written to prove a point, but to expose a pulse. "They were going to throw me out because my son was arrested, and they said I brought crime into the building. You did not look at my zip code. You looked me in the eyes. You made that man from the property office read the housing code twice. And when he walked out, I saw fear in his face. You did not yell. You did not even raise your voice. But you raised me." Jasmine blinked once, but did not break. Her voice grew steadier. "They laughed at your school on the news the other night. They said it was just some local campus. But I know which school taught you compassion, and I think compassion should be a required course." Silence fell heavy. It was not awkward. It was reverent. Like the room had been reminded that beneath all the arguments and politics, real people still live with the consequences. "I framed your business card. It is on my fridge. You said the law was on my side, but the truth is you were." Jasmine folded the letter with the same care she unfolded it. She did not look at JD. She did not need to. The look on his face said enough confusion, unease, the kind of discomfort that comes when theory gets slapped by reality. She looked directly into the cameras this time, as if addressing not just Congress, but every living room across America. "They say the Ivy League teaches excellence, but can it teach you how to sit with a stranger in a home, with no heat, and still make them feel like justice is possible?" She let the question hang unanswered, echoing, because in that moment it was not about schools anymore. It was about what kind of lawyer you became when the robe came off and all that was left was who you stood beside. Can a $300,000 degree teach you how to warm a freezing home with just your presence? The last sentence of Jasmine's reading still echoed when JD Vance leaned forward, voice slick with condescension. He tapped his pen once, twice, like a countdown before a punchline. "I am sure Rosa appreciates your storytelling," he said loud enough for the cameras. "But the law does not run on emotion. It runs on results. So, just out of curiosity, what was your GPA again?" The air in the chamber shifted. It was not the question. It was the smirk behind it. JD's tone carried the same chill as a locked door in winter. He was not looking for information. He was looking for ammo. Something that could reduce Jasmine Crockett to just another diversity hire in his script. Jasmine did not flinch, did not even adjust in her seat. Instead, she reached into the same leather bag that had sat silently beside her all morning. She withdrew a single-page plain, creased, not a prop evidence. With one motion, she unfolded it and turned it toward the microphones in the gallery cameras. Her voice, when it came, was steady as a judge reading a verdict. University of Houston Law Center GPA 3.86, graduated with high honors National Constitutional Law Thesis, first place 2020. The words hit the room like the drop of a gavel. Reporters froze mid-note. One of the aides to Senator Booker let out a low whistle he could not catch in time. A brief stunned quiet blanketed the chamber long enough for JD's jaw to twitch. Jasmine was not done. She clicked a small remote. Behind her, a large screen flickered to life. It displayed her official transcript, her national competition certificate, and a photograph of her standing on stage in her graduation robe, holding a plaque with her mother beside her in a wheelchair. She did not look at the screen. She looked at JD. "You want numbers," she said quietly. "Here they are. And just so we are clear, no ghostwriters, no donations, no legacy passes, just study sessions at midnight and court clerk work at dawn." JD scratched the corner of his jaw, as if the answer might be hiding in his own hesitation. "Anyone can parade a certificate," he said, but his voice was thinner now, like stretched ice. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. "You mean like a Yale diploma?" she asked. "Because if you want to compare resumes, I do not recall outsourcing my entrance essay to a paid consultant in 2018. The camera cut to JD, caught mid-blink, jaw slightly open, then cut back to Jasmine, still calm, still surgical. "You asked what my GPA was," she said, "but it seems like you were hoping I would not remember yours." A low murmur broke through the gallery like thunder, waiting for permission. She turned back to the committee. "This hearing was about what qualifies someone to speak for the people. I do not think a zip code or a building name on a diploma decides that. The courtroom does, and I have been in enough of them to know your voice does not have to echo off marble to be real." JD sat frozen. No retort, no recovery, just the click of Jasmine's remote as she powered off the screen. If her degree was just paper, why did it cut deeper than anything he ever said? The room had not recovered from the GPA reveal. JD Vance sat like a statue, his fingers frozen mid-adjustment, the smirk long gone. But Jasmine was not looking for applause. She was looking for the finish line. Quiet, sharp, and final. She leaned slightly forward, her eyes not on JD but on the monitors overhead. "Since we are on the subject of earned credentials," she said, almost conversational, "I believe the country deserves the full picture. No drama, just the push of a button on the remote." The screen behind her crackled to life again. A podcast logo appeared, gritty lo-fi, recorded in someone's basement in 2018. The host's voice came through first, laughing rough around the edges. "So you got into Yale Law. That is wild, man. What was your secret?" Then came JD's voice. Clear, relaxed, arrogant. "I mean," JD chuckled in the recording, "I had a consultant polish my personal statement. Technically, the guy rewrote it. But hey, you pay for what works, right?" Gasps did not just escape, they exploded. Staffers turned to each other, stunned. A few senators stared directly at JD, blinking as if trying to unhear what they just heard. Even the court's stenographer paused, fingers hovering. Jasmine said nothing. She did not need to. The silence was louder than any rebuke. JD shifted in his seat, tried to speak, but the screen continued. "Yale is tough to crack," the voice of his younger self went on. "You gotta know someone or know someone who knows someone. My guy had connections. He said he could optimize the essay for committee eyes. I just said, do your thing." The podcast clip ended. Black screen, still no sound in the chamber. Not from JD. Not from anyone. Jasmine folded her hands calmly in front of her. "Now," she said at last, "I have been called a lot of things this week. Coupon lawyer, ghetto attorney, fake degree. But I did not hire anyone to write who I was, because I did not need to." JD tried to interrupt. That podcast was not official. But Jasmine turned to him gently, voice low but unshakable. "You said it yourself. And more importantly, nobody needed to edit it for you to sound entitled." A flashbulb popped in the gallery. Someone whispered, That is game. JD stared ahead, his face tightening, lips pressed into a colorless line. Jasmine turned back to the committee. If we want to talk about earned merit, then let us be honest about what gets bought, what gets ghostwritten, and what gets forged in real trials, not just resume templates. Her hand hovered over the remote, but this time she did not press it. She looked once more at JD. No venom, no victory lap, just a calm that cut deeper than rage. I did not pay someone to tell my story, she said, because I lived every word of it. What is more fake, her degree or his entire origin story? JD Vance did not say a word. He just blinked twice like a man trying to process that the script had flipped in a language he did not speak. Jasmine did not rush to fill the silence. She let it simmer like coals, waiting for the next breath to spark flame. I was not polished, she began, her voice low and calm, yet sharp enough to slice marble. I was prepared. She said it the way some people say vows or verdicts, words that cannot be unsaid once they hit the air. You had legacy letters, endowments, consultants. She turned slightly toward him. I had food stamps, secondhand textbooks, and a mom whose chemo pills cost more than our rent. A ripple of stunned stillness moved across the room, like an invisible breeze, shaking loose the weight of every assumption. Her hands were steady, but her eyes burned like a storm behind glass. While you were strategizing college applications, I was working graveyard shifts at Waffle House, memorizing case law between refills of burnt coffee and broken tips. Her voice did not rise, but the walls seemed to. There are people in this country who think pain disqualifies you from being brilliant. That if you did not go to the right school, you must be a mistake with a microphone. She let her words pause long enough for the cameras to catch her meaning. But you see, pain taught me how to argue like lives depended on it, because they did. JD shifted in his seat, slight nervous. His smirk from earlier was gone, replaced by a look that had not yet decided whether to be angry or afraid. I studied law in libraries that smelled of mildew and despair. Jasmine continued, not marble, not privilege. I read legal briefs in laundromats and waiting rooms and parking lots, while my mom slept in the car beside me after chemo. Her voice cracked, but not from weakness, from weight. And still, she added, holding up the transcript again, I finished with a 3.86. My thesis won a national award. Not because I sounded elite, but because I sounded like the people the law forgets. The room did not breathe. Journalists in the back lowered their pens. Even the political aides stopped scrolling. You paid someone to craft a persona for Yale, she said softly. I had to become a person strong enough to make it without shortcuts. Her gaze never flinched. And when you mocked my degree, you mocked every single student who had to fight for their seat instead of inherited. JD opened his mouth, then closed it. Whatever he was about to say had already lost the war before it began. I did not read the law to impress, Jasmine said, now turning to the panel. I read it to defend, to protect, to prevent injustice from winning just because it was dressed better. The silence that followed was the kind that reshapes careers. A silence that did not ask for applause but stole it anyway. If the degree is not fake, why does the record look so real on only one side? The moment Jasmine's words faded, the echo chamber came alive with fury. Not from the courtroom, but from the studio lights of media strongholds she had never stepped foot in. Within minutes, her name was trending, but not with applause. No headlines praised her precision, her GPA, her courtroom rescue of the innocent. Instead, the spotlight twisted into a flashlight held by men who had never once walked the alleys she had crossed in heels lined with holes. Tucker Carlson's voice hit the airwaves like a drumline of derision. We are witnessing a political performance, he scoffed. A third-rate law graduate using race, gender, and grievance as a shield from scrutiny. He called her monologue scripted poverty. Like the nights Jasmine spent beside her mother's hospital bed were a PR move. He smirked through his monologue like he was slapping away invisible insects. Every gesture designed to mock, to belittle, to disarm, without ever holding a real weapon. Ben Shapiro was not far behind his rhythm, faster, almost surgical. This is not jurisprudence. This is justice cosplay, he said. She read off a judge's letter like it came from God. But let me tell you, judges get things wrong all the time. His voice sliced through nuance like a buzzsaw through a fruit stand. Every syllable worked not to inform, but to exhaust the public's empathy before it could bloom. From the Daily Wire to Breitbart, from Reddit threads to YouTube thumbnails, The swarm was coordinated and vicious. JD did not need to lift a finger. Others were already doing the bleeding for him. One conservative influencer mocked her pearls, calling them welfare chic. Another tweeted, "Real lawyers do not cry about grades, they outthink their opponents." She quoted Rosa Parks like it was a closing argument. And still none of them mentioned that JD had signed a legal document he did not read. But the sharpest blow came from a primetime panel that aired 2 nights later. A host asked if Jasmine Crockett is so brilliant, why did she not get into Yale? A guest laughed, then answered, "Because Yale does not hand out scholarships for emotional trauma." The room laughed too loud, too rehearsed. Not because it was funny, but because silence would have meant someone might actually have to think. Behind the curtain, Jasmine sat in her office, surrounded by screens filled with noise. Her aide asked if she wanted to respond. "No," she said. "If I speak now, they will say it is emotion. If I stay silent, they will wonder if it is strategy." She turned the television off, but not before catching one more headline. "Crockett cracks under pressure." She smiled. Let them guess. Outside, the storm swirled. The Capitol buzzed with speculation. Had she gone too far? Was she pulling back? Or was this silence tactical? Reporters sent her team dozens of emails requesting interviews. Her inbox grew thick with invitations to rebut, to rage, to react. But Jasmine Crockett was raised on principle, not panic. And she knew every time they tried to corner her, they only revealed how much they feared her, standing tall. In Cincinnati, J.D. Vance gave a local radio interview. When asked about Jasmine's accusations, he laughed and said she is playing victim Olympics. "I am playing chess." He thought the line was clever. He did not notice the reporter stopped smiling. He did not notice America was starting to ask questions not about Jasmine, but about him. Because when millions watch a woman hold the line while the nation throws stones, it stops being about degrees. It becomes a question of dignity, of who has earned the right to speak, and who is terrified of what they might say next. Just as the media storm tried to drown Jasmine's credibility, a voice rose from a place no one expected: Yale. Not from students, not from journalists, but from the very man JD once quoted in his own book, Professor Edward Halberstam, former chair of criminal law, who had trained over 120 Ivy League students. He did not need a microphone. He did not ask for airtime. He just wrote one op-ed in the New York Times, and by noon the nation stopped to read. Jasmine Crockett, he began, did not emerge from a seminar on theory. She came from the front lines of law, where there are no whiteboards, no cold brew, just blood, panic, and justice gasping for breath. His words cut through the noise like a scalpel. Then came the line that would later be printed on T-shirts from D.C. to Oakland: Jasmine as the real-world model of American law in action. And we, those who taught JD, never taught contempt disguised as pedigree. The tide shifted. Social media, once hostile, now burned with support. People who had stayed silent were resharing the hearing clip, this time with captions like "Real recognizes real," or "One earned it. One bought it." But the moment that shattered the dam did not come from a professor. It came from a man with no titles, no Ivy League degree, but with scars that do not fade. A handwritten letter arrived at the committee office. It was from a retired Latino veteran, a former infantryman in Iraq. The ink was uneven, the signature shaky, but the message was steel. "I do not know law. I only know who stood beside me when nobody else would." He recounted how back home he was arrested for a crime he did not commit, a paperwork mix-up, he was told. His public defender, Jasmine Crockett, she did not just get his charges dismissed. She exposed a forged police report and had the real culprit brought to trial. JD may talk law, the veteran wrote, but Jasmine lived it with us in places no one else dared to go. Each sentence of that letter tore into JD's carefully groomed image. Each line was a mirror, showing the difference between wearing justice and walking it. Even conservative pundits paused. They had framed her as loud. Now she was being framed as legendary. The final punch came from Yale itself. When asked by CNN whether Jasmine would have been welcomed as a student, Professor Halberstam did not flinch. "We did not just miss the chance to teach her," he said. "We missed the chance to learn from her." And Jasmine, she never raised her voice. She did not quote scripture. She did not drop credentials. She just watched quietly as the country began to understand this was not about where someone studied. It was about what they fought for when no one else would. When the people who trained your enemy choose to stand behind you, who is the real expert now? By the time the sun rose over Capitol Hill the next morning, the marble steps of Congress no longer belonged to politicians. They belonged to the people. Veterans with prosthetic legs stood beside high school students carrying civics books. Black mothers in church hats locked arms with union workers still wearing night shift badges. The air did not just hum. It pulsed thick with something Washington rarely breathed: purpose. Jasmine had not called for a protest. She had not posted a single word. But they came anyway. Thousands. Some drove through the night from Houston. Others flew in from Oakland, Detroit rally. They held cardboard signs that looked like they had been cut on kitchen tables and painted with fury. One caught every camera's eye. Her degree saved lives. His saved face from the Capitol dome. The chants echoed like thunder rolling uphill. Real work, real law. Justice did not go to Yale. Crockett speaks. We listen. Reporters tried to spin it as a partisan march, but something did not fit. The crowd was not left or right. It was wounded and awake. Near the front, a woman clutched her daughter's photo killed by police during a mistaken ID. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Jasmine helped me sue them when no one else would. They mocked her degree. But I am standing here today because she stood up for me." They wept. Even the Capitol Police lowered their eyes. Inside, J.D. Vance watched from the window behind tinted glass. His suit still sharp, tie still perfect. But the crowd did not chant his name. They did not even care if he heard, because this was not about revenge. It was about remembering who the law was supposed to protect. A group of war widows from Ohio laid a wreath of bar exam study guides, symbolically shredded and wrapped in a ribbon that read "Honor over Hierarchy." The image went viral in under 2 hours. Even Fox News could not twist it. Something was changing, and it was not coming from within the chamber. It was surging from the steps outside. Jasmine did not speak at the rally. She did not need to. Her silence had already become louder than JD's Ivy League boasts. Her record, the trials, the letters, the pain had spoken in every language the law had forgotten. She watched from her office window, hand over her chest, eyes locked on the crowd. And for the first time in days, she smiled. Not a triumphant smile, not even a relieved one, just the kind of smile you wear when truth finally breaks through noise like sunlight cutting mist. Can noise defeat purpose? Or does it only delay the moment the world sees who really stood alone and who never needed a podium to lead the room, once echoing with gavel slams and muttered sarcasm, now felt like it was holding its breath? No cameras blinked, no papers rustled. Even J.D. Vance, so animated before now, sat with his chin tucked slightly lower, as if waiting for a verdict only she could deliver. Jasmine Crockett did not rise like a politician. She rose like someone stepping into a place she had already earned. No theatrics, no righteous indignation, just a quiet composure that made even the microphones lean closer. She stood, took a single breath, and looked not at the panel, but at America through the lens. "I will not take much of your time," she began. Her voice was not raised. It did not need to be. It threaded through the chamber like a final stitch in a case already sealed. "I have been called loud. I have been called unqualified. I have been told my education did not count, but I am not here to argue titles." She turned, locking eyes with Vance, but not to scold the witness. "I am not here to outshine Ivy League resumes. I am here because I buried a mother while studying case law. I fought for a wrongly convicted woman when no one returned my calls. I have read every page of this Constitution not to climb, but to catch those who keep falling through it." Her hand rested lightly on her binder, but she did not open it. The courtroom, the newsrooms, the millions watching, none of them needed another document. They needed a moment that felt real. "I do not need to be believed," she said. "I need justice to matter more than polish. And if it does not, then what are we even doing here?" The seconds ticked by. 43, 44. She smiled gently, like someone laying down a final piece on a puzzle she never wanted to solve, but had no choice but to finish. "That is all," she whispered. Then nothing. She did not nod. She did not glance around for approval. She simply sat down. A silence pure and electric wrapped the chamber like velvet. For the first time in the hearing, no one rushed to speak, because no one could top what was just felt. Cameras tried to pan elsewhere, but always drifted back to her. She had not fired a shot. She had not thrown a name. She had simply reminded America that the most powerful thing in a room full of credentials was conviction. And conviction does not beg to be believed. It just stands quiet, unshaken, and waits. The echo of her final words still floated in the chamber like mist over a battlefield. Soft, lingering, undeniable. No one moved. Even the marble columns looked like they were listening. Jasmine Crockett did not rush. She waited not for applause, not for validation, but for silence to do what sound could not settle deep into the ribs of a country that needed to feel its own heartbeat again. Then came the line. She looked past the rows of committee members, past the blinking red lights of the broadcast cameras, past J.D. Vance's stone face, and spoke to a nation. "I do not need you to believe in my degree," she said, steady as gospel. "I need America to believe in justice." And justice never asked for Ivy. It was not a punchline. It was a mirror held up to every living room, every boardroom, every heart, still clinging to the illusion that pedigree meant purity. The weight of her voice was not in its volume. It was in its truth. It did not rise. It cut. J.D. flinched, but so subtly only the still frame cameras would catch it. Somewhere in the back of the room, a journalist lowered his pen and whispered, "That is the quote." And Jasmine, she did not linger. She did not bask. She simply closed her binder with the quiet finality of a judge's gavel. The sound, barely louder than a turning page, rang louder than any shout before it. She stood, her hands calm, her shoulders squared, not in defiance but in peace. Not once did she glance back. Not at the room, not at the man, not even at the screen, still frozen on her name. She walked out as if she knew history does not ask permission to be rewritten. It just needs someone to pick up the pen. And Jasmine Crockett had just left the ink, bleeding across every living screen in the nation. The hearing was over, but the explosion had just begun. Within minutes, every news network dropped their scheduled programming. CNN cut to a split-screen replay of Jasmine's 47-second speech. Fox tried to reframe the silence, but their commentators stumbled, unsure how to attack a woman who had not even raised her voice. On MSNBC, the anchor simply whispered, "Did you hear that? That was history." Social media ignited like a forest fire under drought. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, every platform was flooded with clips, memes, duets, think pieces, hashtags, trended by the minute. Crockett crushes justice over Ivy Silent Thunder. Celebrities reposted her words. Professors quoted her in classrooms. A retired Marine wrote she did not need armor. She was the armor. The clip of her final words was just 47 seconds, was viewed 40 million times before nightfall. In barbershops and diners across the country, people watched the footage on loop, shaking their heads like they had just seen someone bend the rules of gravity. In a cafe in Detroit, a college dropout whispered to his mom, "She made me believe again." Back in Texas, at her childhood church, the pastor paused mid-sermon and played her words over the loudspeaker. The congregation stood clapped, not like fans at a show, but like witnesses to something sacred. "That is our girl," someone wept. "That is our Jasmine." Even in circles that once dismissed her, law firms, academic boards, political panels, people now struggled to find something dismissive to say. Because what do you do when someone dismantles elitism? Not with rage, but with stillness. When someone beats a room full of degrees without flashing a single credential, the comment sections were not angry. They were electric. She did not raise her voice. She raised the bar. She did not come to win. She came to remind us why we fight. That was the sound of a new chapter starting. J.D. Vance canceled 2 interviews that night. His press team issued a vague statement, but silence had already chosen its queen in Jasmine Crockett. She went home. No press tour, no victory lap, just a closed binder on her kitchen table and a quiet moment with her dog. But across America, her echo remained untouched, unchallenged, undeniable. Because sometimes the loudest moment is the one where you say nothing at all. When the entire nation fell silent for a woman who did not need to raise her voice to be heard, we were reminded, true worth is not stamped on a diploma. It is lived through action, courage, and quiet conviction. She did not need to strike back with insults or rattle off credentials. Just calm, strength, belief in justice, and a single sentence that echoed in millions of hearts. In a world where everyone is shouting to be noticed, sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that chooses stillness. Jasmine proved that silence, when anchored in truth, can thunder louder than any speech. Do you still believe respect must be demanded loudly, Or is it time to stand tall? Speak with grace and let your integrity do the talking. If this story made you feel something, do not just scroll like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Truth Stories, where a quiet voice can shake the powerful injustice speaks for itself. Tap the bell, because the next story will not just expose a truth, it might expose who we are. What moment stopped you in your tracks? Tell us in the comments. Do not just witness history, be part of the memory. This dramatized story is inspired by real struggles and real people. All characters and dialogue are fictionalized for commentary and education. It is not intended to defame or mislead, but to inspire reflection and civic awareness. Thanks for watching. Truth is not over. It is just waiting for someone to hear.